Hi guys, it's Kelly here, and today we are going to be using some stamps from Pretty Pink Posh. This is Camping Friends, and then the other one we're going to be using just the trees from, and that is Holiday Pals. So I had done a card with this stamp set, a very simple card, probably about a week ago, and I knew I wanted to come back to it and do a scene. In this stamp set, there is this adorable little campfire, and that can be, when you have a light source on your card, you're talking about directional lighting. Now, what I'm doing is basically just stamping out the scene that I want. So I'm masking and stamping as I'm going. I'm using full stick Post-it notes for my masks. But for directional lighting, when you have a light source on your card, you can't ignore it. Not if you're doing a scene anyway. It just wouldn't look right. So normally I pick my light sources in the top right, so all my shadows go to the bottom left, and it's super easy for me to figure out where all my shadows should go. This is going to be just a little bit more complicated, but not much. It's really simple to do if you just kind of pay attention. So here I knew I wanted to do, there's 3 sets of stars included in the stamp set. There's a solid, an outline, and then like a sketchy, kind of like how we all learned how to draw stars, you know, where you connect the points. So I just mounted all 3 of them on a small block, and I am going to heat emboss them. So make sure you start with some sort of type of anti-static tool. I used an embossing buddy, stamping in Versamark, and I'm using white embossing powder from Simon Says Stamp. Once I hit all of the stars down, which I just kind of stamped more toward the top, I put all of my masks back in place. Here I'm going to do a distress ink background. That's just one of the easier ways I have found to do a background for a scene. I also like using the Zig Clean Color markers if I want a watercolor look. I'm starting with the mustard seed, and I'm just kind of concentrating that area right around the campfire because it's going to have that yellowish orange glow. And then I'm going to use 2 more full back sticky Post-it notes to block off my ground so I can do my sky. I'm going to start with Salty Ocean, and basically the way that I applied it was just kind of like in a half circle, like a little half moon. I got as close as I could to that yellow without actually touching it. So there is like a small band of white between the yellow and the blue, and this is just to make sure I didn't get green in my sky. Because, you know, if you were looking at this scene, the light that was coming up from your campfire would not, in fact, turn the sky green. So once I'm happy with the Salty Ocean, I'm going to go in with Blueprint Sketch, and the same thing. I'm going to follow that half moon shape, but I'm not going to cover all of the Salty Ocean. So it's going to be much darker at the top than it would be around that campfire. Then Chip Sapphire is really the complete half moon. I did add black soot, but I really only added that to like the top corners. And that was just for contrast purposes. So you could really see those super pretty stars. I mean, I didn't stamp them for no reason, right? So once I was done with the sky, I went ahead and moved the full sticky Post-it notes to the other side. So now I'm masking off the sky so that I can do the ground. This I kept like uber simple. I just picked 2 colors, 2 browns. I like brushed corduroy. That's like my go-to for dirt or ground. And I did the same thing with the half moon. This one you could probably take into the yellow. You don't need to leave that band of white because brown and yellow are going to blend well together. And then just on the edges, I added the vintage photo. So once all that was done, I removed those sticky Post-it notes, and I'm going back in with the mustard seed one more time just to kind of blend that yellow with everything I already had going on the card, so there wasn't like a line of demarcation or anything weird like that. I'm going to go ahead and remove all of my masks. There was just a little bit more masking in the stamp set. There's little critters. They're like totally adorable little critters. And so you can use them, you know, to like pop up from behind a log or, you know, whatever. But in this version, I just cut the mask I already had so I could stamp them inside like they were having a little sleepover, a little camping sleepover, which I thought would be really cute. I also forgot to mention, I did heat emboss a sentiment on that sign. It says Happy Trails in white. You'll see that when we start to color it. So I'm going to stamp these guys, remove that mask, and then we're going to head into the Copic coloring. This is where we're really going to talk about the directional lighting. So we have the fire that's almost directly in the middle of the card. which means it is not going to hit all of your elements the same way because it's a circular light. So it's like a radial. It's coming from all directions of that fire. So it's going to hit everything a little different. These trees to the left-hand side, it's going to make their right-hand side brighter. So when you're doing your shading, I'm still doing the same thing that I always do. I'm starting with my lightest color and then working out to my darkest back out to my lightest, using a light hand, feathering motions, so everything kind of blends. But that right-hand side is going to be so much lighter because of the campfire light. The tree that's stamped in the back is going to be darker, just the tip will have a highlight. And then the tree on the left-hand side, anything that the first tree isn't blocking. So that's another thing that you want to pay attention to. Here, I picked this yellow. I thought it matched the best. And then this is what I'm going to add in all of my highlights with, because fire has a color. So it casts a yellow and orangish glow. You want to keep, you want it to make sense. It's not going to be a white highlight. For this tree, the light, because it's directly behind it, again, we're paying attention to what's blocking the light. That tent would block the light on the right-hand side of the tree, so we want to pay attention to that. But then it would hit the tree in the center because it's directly behind it. So where we have the trees on the left, the light's going to be on the right. This tree, the highlight's going to be in the center because of that radial light. So the only place that I really used the darkest color was where it would be behind the tent. And I did still add some shading underneath each layer of tree. I mean, the light isn't going to completely get up underneath those branches. And then just go back in with the yellow just like we did on the other trees to add those in. Now, if you watch my videos, normally I don't show you me coloring each individual thing if they're all the same. The reason I'm showing you all the trees is because all of the shading is not the same. So I do these videos so that you can learn the things that I know. And so even though it's a little bit of a longer video, I think this one's almost it's like 16 minutes or something. I'm assuming you're watching because you'd like to learn something. If not, please let me know and I can shorten them up at any time. So here, the darkest part is going to be on the right because the light is on the left. So that's where, again, the tent is going to be blocking that light. So we're going to pay attention to that. And it's just going to be the top portion of the tree that's going to get any light whatsoever. So I feel comfortable, coloring in the bottom with just straight green. And then I'll add the yellow to just the top portion for that particular highlight. So that's the trees. And now we're going to move on to this sign. So here you see me holding my pen. This sign is stamped slightly in front of the campfire, which means it's going to be backlit. And you'll have to bear with me here because I was so concentrating on the shading that I did not realize that I was partially off camera. My bad. Nobody's perfect. So here with the backlighting, the edges of your image are going to be the lightest. That's when anything is backlit. Now you can see me, I am coloring right over this heat embossing. Copics are alcohol based. They will color anything basically, so they're going to color your embossing powder. If you don't want that to happen, stamp your embossing afterward, or here's a trick I'll teach you later to kind of clean it up. I wanted my sign to look a little bit weathered, so I was totally comfortable with coloring over it. But with backlighting, you're going to take your lightest edges are going to be on the outside. Your darkest portion is going to be in the middle because the light is behind it. So none of the light is going to touch anything that's in the center. If I had done it where it was backlit all of the same, it would look like the fire was directly behind it. So the left-hand side of my sign is a little bit darker than the right-hand side of my sign because the fire is to the right. So here is how I'm going to clean it up. I'm just going to take my colorless blender. I'm not even pushing down. I'm just swiping right across the embossing, the heat embossed areas, and that kind of picks up some of the color. It's not going to pick up all of it, but I wanted mine to look weathered, so I didn't need it to. Also, do this at your own risk. Word on the street is it can ruin your Copic nibs. I do it anyway because I don't care. I haven't ever had an issue, but again, these are your markers. This is your investment. It's your choice of what you want to do. So we're moving on to the fire. I kept my strokes pretty sporadic. I wanted to make sure I wasn't going to have any solid color. So I'm just using some varied flicking motions, making sure that the color isn't solid. I kind of wanted to convey some movement with the flames, since fire does move, just to make sure that, it looked like it fit the scene. Now you'll see I've already colored the wood underneath it. I used the same browns I did for the sign, and I didn't do anything spectacular. There wasn't any shading to be done on it because it's directly underneath the fire. So we're going to do the tent now, and I wanted it to be red. I thought that it would be a complementary color to what was going on here, and B, I just thought that it would be a nice, I guess, like pop of color. Everything is kind of like all natural colors outside of that fire, so I was trying to bring in something maybe a little bit brighter. So for the shading here, on the right flap of the tent, the darkest portion is going to be to the right. The highlight will be right on the edge. But for the part that's right in front of the fire, it's going to be a center. So this, even though it's the same object, it has two different points of light that's going to be hitting it. So we're going to be paying attention to that for sure. The darkest color I only used where the tent overhangs, and then on the right hand side where it would be darkest. This is one of those, usually when I shade objects, again, if you watch my videos, I use 4 colors. For a lot of these, I only used 3 because they were going to be in front of something, or they were going to be a brighter highlight just because of the light source. So sometimes you just have to adapt what you normally do to what the look you're trying to achieve. And this really is not too terribly difficult if you just look at regular everyday objects. So if you Google campfires, you can see images, or maybe you go camping. We go camping all the time. But if you look at those images, you can see that yellow cast, the way that the shadows fall. So these are all things that you can see. Speaking of adaptability, normally I go over my images 2 times and I'm done with that. But for this one, the yellow wiped out so much of that light red. I had to go back in and add more red in there because it was like gone. So, just do what kind of works for you. Here, my intention was to color the inside of the tent darker. So I was going to do my 2 darkest colors, my R29 and my R59. Except I didn't feel like it gave me enough contrast and it looked just kind of flat. So one of the ways that you can get more contrast, add better shading, is to use that color's complementary color. So there I just used one of the darker greens. I think I used the YG97 from the trees and shaded the back of the tent with that because it's a complementary color to red. They're going to work together to deepen those shadows. And then I didn't have to bring in another red color, which is a really good thing because R59 is the darkest red that I have. So I didn't have a darker color to bring in. I still don't, even though I have full set syndrome, I still don't own all of the Copics, so I'm gradually trying to build them up, but R59 was what I had. Here we're going to do the coloring for the animals. Those little flaps are going to create some shading. So the highlights are going to be for the raccoon on the right side of his face. For the beaver, it's going to be on the left side of his face. And we're going to create some black, but even with my black, I left some areas that were lighter because I knew I wanted that yellow to be able to show through. When you're doing this, especially when it comes to characters or people, you're going to think, oh my gosh, I'm doing this wrong. Like I'm coloring yellow on this little critter's face, or I'm coloring green, or whatever your highlight color is. You're not doing it wrong. Just stick with it, because when you're done and you have the full card, you'll see how cool that looks. I mean, it just looks super cool to have something that looks different. So I chose some cooler browns to do the beaver in, just because I wanted him to kind of stand out from the rest of, I had really warm browns in the rest of it. The brush corduroy, the vintage photo, all of the E50 family is just super warm colors. So I wanted him to be a little bit different, a little bit apart. And again, the darkest color I'm only going to use where the tent is kind of overflapping him. I did make his ear a little darker than the rest of that side of his face because it falls behind his head. So anything that's darker automatically falls to the background. And then we're going to add the yellow on the left side of his face because that's where the fire light would be hitting it. Also, if you're masking, and when you do distress inking, if you have any areas that you miss, just find a Copic that matches and fill it in. That's what I do. These shadows are what's going to make your scene. Okay, I swear to you, they are, because it's such a total difference. So with the backlighting, the way that the light would hit it would put that sign's shadow down and to the left. But it would put the back trees up and to the left, and the tree on the right hand side up and to the right, because it's that radial light. And this is what really is going to give it the feel, that more realistic feel of your directional light. Any kind of shadow is going to be darker towards the closer it is to the object. So I added just a little bit more shading with a darker brown and then blended that back out with my E55 for just some texture and some interest, because the top of the card had so much going on. The bottom background just felt kind of plain. I just added a couple little dots for, dirt, stones, what have you, just to put some texture in there. I'm going to use my white gel pen to add some white dots to the sky so that it isn't so, there isn't such a delineation between the stars and the rest of the sky. It just kind of fills that area in nicely, so there's a soft, I guess the stars are more gradual. They build more gradually. I always outline all of my images, so I'm going to do that with I always use a Copics safe writing pen just in case I have to go back in and touch up something. This is clear Winkostella. I just put that anywhere the firelight would be touching, just for some shimmer. And then I'm not pressing down, I'm very, very lightly just swiping my brush across the top of the star so that there is some shimmer up there too, but it's just kind of haphazard. So that is the whole card. I hope that this helped you see how maybe you can achieve directional lighting. If you have any questions, by all means, feel free to leave me a comment. Thank you so much for joining me, and I will catch you guys on the next video. Bye.